probably quality, not quantity today, Edwina.
Oh, we're obviously not drawing the crowds, Rob.
Well, there was 60 for the COVID briefing yesterday.
Yeah.
Well, Matt, you tell me when to start.
Okay. Well, perhaps just give it one more minute.
Okay.
Okay, Rob and Edwina, I think we should make a start now.
Right, thank you. Welcome members to the second in a series of public-facing all-member briefings reviewing progress made in delivering the Council's priorities for Cornwall. I'm Councillor Rob Nolan, Portfolio Holder for Environment and Public Protection, and this presentation will be a double act with Councillor Edwina Hannaford, Portfolio Holder for Climate Change and Neighbourhoods. This session will report on the green elements of our green and prosperous Cornwall priority, which extends across both of our portfolios. For the benefit of any external viewers, the Council agreed the priorities for Cornwall at the start of the current administration back in June 2017, a month after the last council elections, and we have remained focused on their delivery over the past 4 years. As we count down to the next council elections in May, it feels appropriate to take a moment to reflect on how far we've come in delivering on the commitments we made to the people of Cornwall. That is why these briefings are public facing, so I would like to extend a warm welcome to any viewers from outside the council who may be watching. In addition to reporting on progress on each of the priorities, these sessions will also reflect on the impact of the pandemic and the opportunities that we need to grasp to help deliver our new 2050 vision, together with some of the more immediate steps being taken in the 2021-22 budget. So I'll hand over to Edwina to remind colleagues of what we set off to achieve 4 years ago.
Thank you, Rob. Slide 2, thank you. When setting the 5 priorities for Cornwall, we recognise the importance of our incredible environment and the value of Cornwall's natural assets in helping to tackle climate change. So just to reaffirm, having listened to the public, we agreed the 3 green focus aims in bold on the slide. These are namely reducing waste by increasing reuse and recycling, supporting the development of renewable energy and environmental growth, and aspiring to be a clean Cornwall that residents and visitors are proud of. But in everything we do and have done in respect of the bottom 3, we have tried to contribute towards the top 4 aims listed on the slide to contribute to a more prosperous Cornwall. For example, using the Council's farm holdings to create jobs in the renewable energy sector, specifically biomass technologies. Next slide, please. We also agreed a number of measures that would define our success, with the 3rd and 4th listed on the slide being our area of focus, namely the percentage of Cornwall's household waste sent for reuse, recycling and composting, and the number of spaces benefiting from environmental growth funding or activities, including the Green Infrastructure for Growth Fund and the Grow Nature Seed Fund. Next slide, please. This timeline captures just a small amount of the Council's achievements since 2017, starting with the award of green flags and running through to taking steps to support and increase the use of electric cars in Cornwall. In between those 2 achievements, the Council has delivered many more initiatives which range in size and scale, but all of them have contributed towards Cornwall being greener and cleaner. Rob and I will highlight some of these in more detail in a moment, but we are really proud of what the Council and you have delivered since 2017. But we must pay credit to Councillor Sue James, who was the previous portfolio holder for the first 2 years and kick-started a number of these initiatives. Likewise, we want to pay credit to council officers and our partners, particularly the local nature partnership, who have made all this possible. Next slide, please. Jeff mentioned the funding secured to install a further 150 electric vehicle charging points in his Connecting Cornwall presentation last week, and it's a great example of how the transport and the environment teams are working together to reduce carbon emissions. An even bigger statement, quite literally, towards reducing emissions was made last year when the first smart grid wind turbine was erected on council-owned land at Venton Teague. This turbine provides enough renewable energy to power over 1,400 homes and reduces Cornwall's carbon emissions by 3,300 tonnes per annum. We have also taken steps to complete whole house retrofits on 83 homes managed by Cornwall Housing, with the intention of doing many more, with the £12.9 million for over 100 more whole house retrofits and 600 solar panel installations to improve the energy efficiency of Cornish homes. We are also breaking new ground in our efforts to reduce emissions. The council-owned farms being used to convert methane gas to biogas, which will then fuel Cormac's fleet of vehicles. I'll hand over to Rob now.
Thank you. On to slide 6, please. I want to start by echoing Edwina's thanks to my predecessor, Councillor Sue Jones, but also the officers for their support in making what you can see on the slide and so much more possible. It's been a long process, but we are on the cusp of starting to roll out our new waste contract, which will see the introduction of weekly food collections later this year. I'm confident that this new service will prove popular and we will start to see an increase in the overall amount of household waste sent for reuse, recycling and composting beyond the current figure of 42%. The other area I want to spotlight are the works being undertaken to tackle flooding and coastal erosion, with the example in the slide being the 3.7 million scheme along the frontage of Mounts Bay to protect the railway line, improve the coastal path and enhance the adjacent natural habitat in the Marazion marshes. Right across Cornwall, we are funding, supporting and delivering environmental projects that are protecting and enhancing our open spaces. And I'm really proud of what the council has achieved over the past 4 years.
Thank you. Slide 7. We wanted to highlight 4 specific achievements that link directly back to the original aims and success measures. So we're going to focus on tackling climate change and the ecological emergency, the Forest for Cornwall, making space for nature, and our successful Litter Less campaigns. Next slide, please. While the pandemic demanded our attention over the last year, the climate emergency is the defining challenge of our time and will command the Council's focus and direction for the next 10 years and beyond. The pandemic has forced unprecedented changes to how we have all lived and has also been instrumental in helping us to understand how we can all change our behaviours when we have to. If we are to be successful in our ambition for Cornwall to become carbon neutral by 2030, we all have to change how we think, how we work and how we live. We have a long way to go, but we have already achieved so much in our response to the climate emergency we agreed in early 2019 and in our subsequent Carbon Neutral Cornwall Action Plan that followed 6 months later. Slide 9, please. I've already referred to a number of the actions we've already taken, but to mention just a few more because there are so many. We have supported geothermal trials at Eden and United Down, which is shown on the slide. £500,000 of SIL money, that's community infrastructure money, has been aligned to climate change and is already supporting 14 low carbon projects. We have developed and introduced a new nationally recognised decision-making wheel to ensure we put people and planet at the heart of everything we do. We have supported schools' eco-conferences, helping young people and teachers understanding of climate change, as well as creating a carbon-neutral Cornwall Youth Ambassadors Network. We have invested in the Council's first wave of electric fleet vehicles and provided online carbon literacy training for our 6,000 employees, which will also be made available to members. And of course, the Forest for Cornwall, our natural climate change solution, planting new canopy cover in our countryside, towns and in our villages. Next slide, please. Because of how trees can help with climate change through carbon drawdown, the Forest for Cornwall is one of our priorities. The first trees towards the Forest for Cornwall were planted in Saltash in a community park just over a year ago. Since then, the forest has continued to grow, and there will soon be 100,000 new trees planted in Cornwall, absorbing carbon and locking it into the ground. And there are more trees going into the ground through COVID-safe practices as the planting season continues. Next slide, please. Placing the right trees in the right place for the right purpose, the forest will see new woodlands, trees, copse and hedgerows in our towns, villages and countryside. As well as increasing all forms of canopy cover, we are also protecting Cornwall's existing backbone of trees, woodland and hedges, and increasing our natural climate change solutions through other natural planting, including marine eelgrass, soil carbon, and the beautiful wildflower meadows that we've all enjoyed last summer. I'm delighted that our Forest for Cornwall crowdfund grants and Projects That Matter scheme are supporting tree planting schemes from Calstock, Lunston and Padstow and creating valuable wildlife habitats. Next slide, please. The Forest for Cornwall would not be possible without the support of key partners like our town and parish councils, schools, community groups across Cornwall, and in particular the Woodland Trust, who congratulated the council for leading the way in local government with our ambition to create woodland areas for the benefit of people, wildlife and climate. We now know that people actually recover better after illness if they can see trees, and the pandemic has highlighted for us all how important trees and green open spaces are for our well-being, and of course they help our planet, nature and wildlife as well. Over to Rob.
I want to highlight a project which the Council is delivering with the University of Exeter using European Regional Development Funds, which is all about making space for nature. With much funding from the Council and working in partnership with local communities, we are spending 2.9 million over the next 3 years transforming green deserts into wildlife-friendly spaces. Now, green desert, the little patches of grass that are left when we build a new estate somewhere, little bits of grass, not enough to kick a football around, just grass, no life in them at all. Refill them up with wildflowers like you can see in the slide, make a whole difference to them, and the community love it. And the reason we're doing this is crystal clear. Cornwall is in a climate and ecological emergency, so we need to create healthier habitats everywhere for species to colonise, allowing natural systems to rebalance, which in turn will improve the lives of people. An area approximately the size of 35 rugby pitches has already been transformed, and a further 28 will be made wildlife and people friendly, which includes spaces such as recreation grounds, parks and verges. I'm particularly pleased with the verges, you've seen that, although I did get criticised for putting wildflowers in the central reservations because the bees might get scorched going across to them, but they seem to manage. Parks and verges create havens for bees, butterflies, birds and hedgehogs. Spaces in Falmouth, Launceston, Newquay, Liscar, Penryn and St Austell are being transformed, with work already underway, and the rolling programme will complete in December 2022. In 2018, we launched the Litterless Cornwall campaign as a social movement to protect Cornwall from litter, dog fouling, fly tipping and other environmental crimes. All these offences are a blight on Cornwall, but it's not something we can tackle alone. Hence, it was designed to be a social movement to encourage residents to stand shoulder to shoulder with the council in saying enough is enough. And we have seen a rise in dog fouling during lockdown. So let's watch out for it. Report it on the council website when you see it. By making a pledge to leave only footprints, residents and the council are saying Cornwall won't put up with litter anymore. Since 2018, a number of initiatives have been taken to reinforce the campaign, including supporting the 2-minute beach cleans, which has resulted in about 1,000 litter pick events and the removal of about a ton of waste each year from our beaches. If you're on Twitter, have a look at Lego. There's a Twitter feed, Lego on our beaches. Amazing amount of Lego gets washed up, tons of plastic. We've also helped Clean Cornwall to collect 707 bags of litter since 1st of January 2019 and distributed 86,440 of high street funding grants to 69 community projects and marshal 1,064 volunteer litter pickers, sweeping the streets, benches, parks and coastal paths. The council has also set up community enforcement partnership programs to train our civil parking enforcement officers in issuing fixed penalty notices for dog fouling, littering and dogs on beaches. As a result, fixed penalty notices issues have jumped from 17 in 2018-19 to 84 in 2019 and 20. And the partnership has carried out 1,930 high visibility dog fouling patrols. We wanted to provide an example of how, through this priority, the council has lived the values agreed in June 2017, namely, we listen, we are responsible, and we act in the best interests of Cornwall. In 2017, residents' surveys revealed that only 29% of Cornwall's population agreed that the council was making the area greener, which was heard by us loud and clear. The council responded and enshrined our commitment to making Cornwall greener within one of our 5 priorities for Cornwall, namely green and prosperous Cornwall. Since 2017, the council has ensured that the whole organisation and our partners have steadfastly sought to make Cornwall greener through an incredible array of projects, many of which are groundbreaking and a few award winners. Fast forward 4 years, and we can justifiably lay claim to be the Green Peninsula, with residents recognising the efforts made by the council and partners. In 2019, we saw a 21% increase in the number of people agreeing that the council is making the area greener. We listened, we responded, and we are continuing to make Cornwall greener. Turning now to the impact of the pandemic on this priority, it's fair to say that Cornwall's environment is one of the few areas to have benefited from the situation that we've lived through over the past 10 months. We've seen traffic volumes decrease, especially during the first lockdown, and considerably more people taking the opportunity of enjoying and appreciating Cornwall's incredible open spaces and getting healthier. And I think we all heard birdsong for the first time and realised just how much noise there was from the traffic. Our primary concern during the pandemic was keeping people safe when outdoors, followed by taking steps to persuade residents to make a permanent shift to a more sustainable lifestyle. From the start of the first lockdown, we promoted the safe use of public outdoor spaces and asked residents to follow the latest social distancing measures. We reopened our household waste and recycling centres, with each site having a bespoke plan to protect the safety of site users and staff. And we had our odd number plates, even number plates to sort of slow down the numbers going in. But although some people said that was awkward, it's better than having the booking system that councils upcountry paid for, which that's paid for. Ours is free. And we get more people through each day than their booking systems. With support from Visit Cornwall, the council issued clear messaging to discourage wild camping to avoid the associated problems with litter and sanitation. We also took the opportunity to launch an online carbon neutral Cornwall Hive site to encourage residents to move toward low carbon living. We also teamed up with crowdfunders to launch Climate Emergency Community Fund. Also, it's been really uplifting to see more people jumping on their bikes during the pandemic, with cycling rates increasing by 20% between October 2019 and October 2020. We will continue to take steps to promote cycling so that figures don't slip back, but if anything increase as a result of our investment in cycle paths and trails. It's worth noting the green impact of the pandemic on the council, as we have seen dramatic decreases across key carbon burning areas. We won't know the full effect until the year end, but some individual headlines are an overall reduction in business travel of 70%, significant reductions in commute travel with an estimated average reduction of 80,000 miles a day. Printing reduced from 2 million pages a month before the pandemic to 200,000 a month during the initial lockdown. With around 5,800 employees, that translates into big savings in emissions, and we must sustain those levels beyond the pandemic.
Thank you, Rob. Some staggering statistics there. The council has unquestionably made great strides in creating a greener Cornwall, and the organisation has responded incredibly well with our partners to deal with the impact of COVID-19. As already highlighted, the pandemic has forced all of us to adjust our lifestyles, and it shows that 2030 carbon neutral target is attainable. We have to have hope, especially if we bounce forward as opposed to bouncing back to how it was before. It would be another body blow if we let all these environmental gains just fall away when we finally come through the pandemic. The key will be capitalising individuals' appetites for change expressed in the June 2020 residents' survey on the impact of the pandemic. 3 highlights of that. 66% of residents said they had a greater appreciation of green spaces, paths, beaches for daily exercise. 70% had a greater appreciation of cleaner air outdoors, and 63% had a greater appreciation of more wildlife. Encouragingly, a cleaner environment, closer communities and reduced traffic were the most mentioned topics that residents would like to see retained and enhanced once the pandemic is over. This provided a clear mandate for the council and our partners to grasp and capitalise on the opportunity for change, and that is precisely why we developed our new 2050 vision. Slide 20. Creating a cleaner, greener Cornwall is one of the 2 core aims of the 2050 vision, Gwilym Warboth. Together we can, the Cornwall plan, and underpins 2 of the 6 transitions, namely, establishing a creative net carbon zero economy by 2050. No one in Cornwall is unwillingly out of work, and all jobs are paid at least the real living wage, tackling in-work poverty. We have quadrupled our production of renewable energy, creating green jobs and helping to power the decarbonised national economy. And secondly, ensuring sustainable food, land and seas. So by 2050, no child depends on food banks for good nutrition, and sustainably produced Cornish food and drink is highly sought after. We've got a good head start on that one. Cornwall is growing nature with twice as much land and 4 times as much inshore waters in active management for environmental growth. Prior to the pandemic, both these transitions may have seemed unachievable, but our collective response to the challenges of 2020 have improved that together we can change our behaviours and take actions to make that 2050 vision a reality. Next slide, please. Our draft budget proposals for 21-22 will see Cornwall taking a number of steps towards delivering that 2050 vision and those 2 key transitions by rolling out our new waste contract, as Rob has already mentioned, continuing to enhance Cornwall's amazing natural environment to encourage people to lead healthier lives, in line with our roadmap to a carbon neutral council by 2030, we aim to reduce the council's carbon footprint by 12%. That equates to removing 1,400 tonnes of CO2 equivalent from the council's operations, and we will do this in a number of ways, which include reducing emissions from our estate by 4%, 450 tonnes, through the first wave of improvement works, and transitioning a further 20 of the council's fleet of vehicles to electric, building on the first wave of 11 electric vehicles delivered this financial year. So this week, members, you joined me when we launched the Localism Vision and Strategy, which sets out how we will empower and work with our passionate communities across Cornwall to achieve our shared vision for the future. The principles of localism and devolution are enablers for climate actions in our communities. We absolutely need to ensure that the public's appetite for change, as highlighted previously, translates into collective community action to help Cornwall decarbonise and decentralise. We also heard the announcement that Cornwall is going to host the G7 summit this June, which shines an exciting spotlight on Cornwall as a place that makes things happen through collaboration and partnership. Although the summit does bring climate change challenges in world leaders travelling to Cornwall, along with the community challenges in managing the high-profile security associated with an event of this magnitude, the G7 agenda very much reflects Cornwall's own priorities of tackling climate change and building a greener, more prosperous future for all. We are in discussions about how we can make the summit not only more environmentally friendly and keep its carbon footprint to a minimum, and just as importantly, how it can contribute to a lasting legacy for Cornwall's ambition to become carbon neutral. So watch this space. I think we're going to move, so thank you for listening. I think we're going to move into some Q&A, and I hope you found that uplifting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, I can't see the chat either, so someone's going to have to help me out there. I can see, yeah, I can see one hand up, and that's looks to be Councillor Colin Martin.
Thank you both for that. That's some really encouraging stories there of how the council has really made massive progress in improving its operations and changing the carbon footprint of some of its buildings and some of its land. But I know you acknowledged a couple of years ago in the climate emergency declaration and the plan that followed it, that the council itself is only really a very small percentage of Cornwall as a whole, and I'm wondering what else we can do to try and help everybody else come with us on this journey. Because if all that the public are able to do is vote for a greener council but not actually make their own lives greener, then we will have failed. And I think I'm encouraged that more and more people do want to make that change and are persuaded that it needs to happen. But the challenge is that they're finding it difficult to actually do so because of the financial costs. And as I look out across out my window across Loswithiel, I can see lots of people have already got solar panels on their roofs, but my worry is it's the people who've got the cash in the bank to begin with that can afford to do it. People who are better off can afford to get themselves an electric car, can afford to insulate their home, can afford to move to a newer home, can afford the solar panels or the heat pumps or whatever. And wonder what we can do to help make that more accessible for everyone. So first of all, I know that the rules on salary sacrifice have changed so that we can now offer all of our employees in Cornwall Council the opportunity to lease an electric vehicle for their own use at a much cheaper price than they could do if they were buying it privately. And I wonder, have you got any figures? I know you mentioned that there's 20 of the council's own vehicles are going to go electric this year. Have we got any figures for how many of our employees have managed to go electric with their own personal vehicles, and could we do more to encourage and promote that? Some good news last week that you mentioned being talked about recently about more charging points, but I'm a bit concerned that where those charging points are being placed, and where the free market is putting some charging points, and the prices of those charging points is again sort of helping some people more than others. I stopped at Fradden the other day and saw the Shell station there has got a 150 kilowatt charging point, but it costs 39 pence a unit, which is actually more expensive per mile than filling your car up with diesel at the forecourt right next to it. And so again, we need to make sure people have got access to affordable charging points. I recently discovered that there is a grant scheme available for putting in some renewable heating systems in your home, but not for any solar systems. In Scotland, the government there will lend people up to £38,500 towards electric battery storage and solar panels and all sorts of things. And I wonder if we could use our borrowing power as a council to make some kind of a rolling fund available where we could help people to afford to improve their homes and put a charge against the house. I'm nearly there. And then the other thing that I'm concerned about is, as the climate is continuing to change and we're having more extreme weather events, what has the council got in place for sort of greater resilience? Like, are we going to review the situation where we currently ask town and parish councils to pay for their own grit boxes? Or have we got anything in the plan for the increased number of landslides and potholes that we're going to have to deal with? I've had every January for the last 3 years, there's been a landslide on the same hill in Lostwithiel, and there's another one happened last week. And then very finally, the government has talked a lot about how Brexit is allowing us to change the way we subsidise farmers, and the environmental land management scheme. It talks about a good Liberal Democrat policy of paying farmers public money for public goods. And I wonder whether there's anything that we as a council could do to make sure that the public get their voice in there, and it's not just a conversation between a farmer and someone from DEFRA, but has also got a real voice of our local community in there, so that we can say, perhaps through our community network areas, these are the priorities of the public in this area, whether it's about walking routes or cycle routes or protecting ancient woodland, that could feed into that process for farm subsidy. So thanks for everything you've done so far, and just to throw a few more of those things in there for consideration.
Okay, I'll try and remember all of those. Can I kick off then, Rob, and then I'll hand over to you. So you're absolutely right. The council can't do this on our own. I'm far more confident that the council will be carbon neutral, and by 2030, and we have got a route map to that. Most of it will be from taking actions, a little bit of offsetting. We've met this week with the team to challenge the team about how we're going to achieve that. We've reviewed the action plan as well to see, are we focusing our efforts into the right places? Could we get more bang for our buck? We need to keep our eye on the prize, I think. You're also correct that the council produces, I think it was about 1.5% of carbon in Cornwall, so that says 98.5% is by the rest of Cornwall. We were also really clear that there had to be social justice in this, and that's why we've used the decision-making wheel, which talks about people and planet, so considering both of that. So there is a risk that it will be the domain of the wealthy and people that are able to take those actions, and that's something we're acutely aware of, and we will make sure that that is reflected in the new plan that we are refreshing at the moment, and that includes a huge engagement plan as well. We really need to get that drumbeat going, and we've had a few setbacks because senior officers quite rightly have been diverted into the COVID response, but they're all back and we've got a full team. So we need to make sure that we can engage with the communities and our partnership. We've got a partnership forum as well. The salary sacrifice, I admit I don't know details of that. I do know that our head of service, Pete Marsh, has used that to purchase himself an electric bike, and I can get details of how that works and how many have taken it up. I've been using an electric bike as a trial, and it's fantastic. It's really great, and I hope that we also noted when we were doing our review of the 80,000 commuting miles that are saved, is that several thousand of the claims from our staff were for journeys less than 3 miles. You know, that really hit home at me. I know it's not always possible to use alternatives, but you know, there's something in that there. Mapping our charging points, well, we haven't mapped where they're going to go yet, Councillor Martin. That was part of the grant application, was to have the resource and the capacity, and I did a quick down and dirty myself looking at the maps, and there's a huge great hole on Rame and Tor Point, for example. There's nothing there. So we're still looking at that. I think we're going to focus on our own depots around our car parks. We'll look at what's out there already and do a bit of an audit. But certainly by the number of emails I have in my inbox, there's a real pent-up demand for all communities to have that. And my wish would be that every community had one. But we can only do 150 for now. And we mustn't forget what the original motion said. We call on government to provide the resources and the powers for us to achieve this. So we can do our system leadership role, and we must work with others, but we need government to step up as well. Perhaps we need to come back to you about the elms with the farmers. That sounds quite interesting, incentivising our partners and communities, but I don't know detail of that, so that's something we can come back to. But we can't do this on our own. Absolutely, you're right. Rob?
Thank you. Recycling at home. The days when you just put everything in a black bag and we took it away and dumped it in a hole in the ground are gone. Thank goodness, we can't be doing that anymore. But it does require effort from people to recycle. It's, you know, there's a lot of faff with all the different boxes and all the different stuff. And you know, do they take plastic lids? I don't know. And it's a lot of bother, and we have to educate people and get them on board because they have to do it themselves. You know, the size of the job ahead of us is that there are huge areas of Cornwall where recycling is 15% of their waste that they put out. They only recycle 15%. We're managing 42% across the country, but we need to do better. A useful thing members might do is to have a look at the website where you can see where your ward fits in. My ward is number 8 out of 123, and on my last leaflet that I've churned out, I've said to them, you're number 8, let's do better, let's get up a bit further. I say leaflet, I don't know where it is. It might be impounded by the government. I'm not sure where it's gone to now. Might be in the post. Cycling, encouraging cycling. With electric bikes, there's a cycling revolution out there, but to get people to do it, we have to make the roads safer and provide them with cycle paths and make it possible. You know, I come out of my road onto a very busy roundabout. It's quite frightening. There's a 20 is plenty campaign going on in the towns. We can slide that in. 20 is plenty, makes it a bit safer. If you are hit by a car, then you know you're less likely to be killed. Is about the best we can say for it. Make our towns safer to cycle in, because we can't provide cycle paths throughout. Electric bikes are going to make such a difference. Litter. Don't throw things away. I mean, what our volunteers collect on the beaches is absolutely astonishing. You know, I mentioned the Lego Lost at Sea Twitter page. Well, that was some Lego that came off a container ship. But regularly we collect surfboards that people have been on holiday and just abandon them all on the beach, or they break. Goggles, flippers. There's someone that specialises in collecting Smarty tops. Smarty tops last forever. If you throw away a Smarty top, it is still out there. Unless we've taken it to the incinerator and burnt it, it's probably, or managed to get it into a recycling box, it's still out there. Someone said that every toothbrush you've ever owned is still out there somewhere. So it's a lot of work, but people have to do it. We can't be constantly with them, stopping them. Flooding. You mentioned flooding. What we're doing with that, there's a lot of work going on. You'll know about the STAR projects in Austell Bay. I mentioned Marazion. We've just put in 2 bids. Mevagissey, the rivers that feed down into Mevagissey, and maybe we can expand the beavers up there and get sort of natural flood defences. But we're also looking at putting in natural methods of monitoring. And also we're working on a sand dune project all around our coast, stabilising and containing the sand dunes. And then farming, we're talking to farmers. It's very difficult. Farmers are, unless it's worth some money, it's difficult to convince them to do it. We're talking to our county farms about green lays. They don't have to just put grass. If they plant a mixture of herbs and things out there, it's better for the cattle and it's better for carbon containment. But they need a bit of convincing that if they're going to have to spend money, what's in it for them? And I have had that conversation with Sophie Hoskins, following on from Chris Jones with the beavers, who said, you're going to get people to put beavers on their land. There should be some incentive. Because they're protecting their bit. They're not that bothered about the flooding that happens 20 miles downriver from them. So why should they have these beavers here? So I talked to Sophie about going away and investigating some way of giving farmers some money for these things that improve our environment, but actually don't improve their pocket. So why should they do it? Well, here's a bit of money. Hope we answered some of your questions there.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I did throw a lot at you there. It's really good to hear that the plan is being refreshed. I look forward to seeing that refresh. You've done a great job on engaging the public, and I think the focus now has to be on enabling people to get on and make the changes that you've inspired them to make.
Yeah. Can I draw perhaps members' attention to the hive, the carbon neutral hive? There is an ideas bank on there. There's lots of guest blogs from our partners. I can see Councillor Martin is on the call, and Helston are doing some fantastic work there. I've heard from Bude this morning that their town council are looking at alternatives to pesticides, and they're using natural solutions to weeds. So there's a lot of innovation going out there. I have a friend called Sam Gill, who's in Loo. He's got a website and a business called Behaviour Change Cornwall, and what he does, he goes and collects all the ghost gear and bits of plastic filaments from beaches, and he actually makes them into and sells them in bracelets. It's not just about the money-making part of it, although it is a small business, but he is really passionate about highlighting this practice, creating a circular economy. So the hive, go to the hive. I can see that Councillor Loveday Jenkin and Neil Burden have their hands up. I'm sorry, I can't see the chat bar. Councillor Jenkin. No? Councillor Burden then.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, that's Elms was referred to. No farmer knows what Elms is about yet. We haven't been told. It's all hype rather than actually where they want farm land managers to go. And that's coming back to Rob's point. You've got to work with land managers, not just them and us. Oh, well, they'll only do it for money. Gosh, all your hedges in Cornwall are trimmed road hedges by the farmers. No, but we don't get paid for it. And I just think be careful where you go. On trees, there's a very big concern now come out this week about the right trees in the right place. And I just think that a lot more guidance needs to be sought on that, because we had problems with the Heath Fertility in Grinscombe Wood. That was before Prince Charles was married to Diana. And even there, they were starting to plant fir trees in this dedicated small area for the Heath Fertility. And of course, the Heath Artillery, that killed the cow wheat, and the Heath Artillery nearly completely disappeared. And Prince Charles actually intervened himself. But I think you've got to be very careful on where you plant these trees. The next thing is beavers. You can have beavers, but you see the people who go on television with their beavers got them all fenced in. Beavers move. We've got beavers at two bridges on the A30, and they've moved downriver. They've moved quite a way, actually, 2 or 3 miles downriver. You know, they moved on, as it were, as animals will. But what I want to, and please don't keep on talking about pesticides. Very few farmers would use a pesticide. They may use herbicides, but not pesticides. And I think that that seems to be one of the things that the public got a bit wrong. But what I want to share with you, one thing I'm concerned about deeply. We have the biggest biomass boiler in Europe at Davidstow. You may know that. And a lorry driver said to me, "This is ridiculous now. Do you know where the biomass comes from? It comes from Russia in pellet form in a big boat. And every day, 3 Arctics bring that biomass from Plymouth to Davidstow." So on one hand, you're like trying to protect the environment, and on the other hand, you're doing things that are damaging the environment. And I just wonder if we aren't too careful, we'll be doing all these wonderful things, but in actual fact, it's maybe even counterproductive. But I was very sad to think that, you know, the biomass has to come from Russia in pellet form. I mean, the cost of that, transport and all the rest, it just staggered me. And the lorry driver who was transporting it actually was upset. So that's all I have to say. But the elms thing is a long way to go yet, because we don't know what is in the brief for any land manager. But I mean, what we got to do is to protect our small farms. And without the agricultural payment that's been sustaining them to a certain amount, if there is no payment, then a lot of our small farms will not be viable in any sense and be bought up by people from the southeast as holiday homes. So I think we've got to be very careful in how we protect the actual environment as our tourist comes to see. That's me. Thank you.
I think that's mainly observations there, Neil. Thank you for those. But yeah, we do have to work with landowners. There's a great deal of knowledge out there. We'd be daft if we ignored it and just told you what we were doing. And we have our experts on the Forest for Cornwall, and we are putting the right trees in the right places, although it's tricky in towns. People love trees, except when the birds are dropping stuff on their cars and they start moaning. But we need them, and we have to work with people, whether they're in town or in the countryside. We want our countryside to look the way it does.
Can I just come back on one thing? The Dartmoor's got an awful problem. Oh, you must go out into the countryside and experience nature, and Wistman's Wood's being wrecked. And they don't know how to manage it. Councillor Sanders was in the press, I think, yesterday or the day before. It's a mess. People are going to Wistman's Wood and ripping off the lichens and moss, and that is the problem. And it's a lot to do with education. You know, and if you want to keep some of these things, you don't go there. You don't take your dog into a nature reserve beside me, which I help manage and graze occasionally and things like that. You know, I go down there to see the sheep, which are now left, of course, because we're waiting for the spring flowers. But you know, there's all this dog mess. Well, it says no dogs allowed, and people walk their dogs in there. And then, of course, walking their dogs, that's how the golden plover nearly disappeared from Bodmin Moor. Nesting because people were out with their dogs. There's nothing worse than a dog disturbing a bird's nest, because the bird sometimes will never return. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Just to follow up on what Rob has said, the Forest for Cornwall team all of them are in place now. If you do have any queries or want some advice, Laura Jones is leading that team. I think the email is forestforcornwall@cornwall.gov.uk. They are incredibly talented and knowledgeable team in place now. And if you do have any, we want to try and match people who've got some money, people who've got trees, and people who've got land. We want to do a little bit of speed dating as far as trees. But don't get too hung up on just trees. It could be a hedgerow. It's whole canopy cover. I think Rob's right. Education, partnership and collaboration are our watchwords. We have to do this together in the spirit of Gwilym Warboth, definitely. We've created a partnership forum with all the main emitting sectors across Cornwall working together, and I'm also on the local enterprise partnership rural subgroup, and they are doing some brilliant work on the interdependency between agriculture, tourism and nature, and making sure and obviously our food security. So some really good stuff going on. So the NFU and all sorts of land managers are involved in that. The term pesticides is a generic term that's used for any chemical that's put on the land, but you're quite right. Some are herbicides and some are pesticides, but it's a bit like saying we're plastic free. We're not necessarily completely plastic free, and it's just a generic term. So is Councillor Jenkin back in the room?
Yes, I am. Sorry,
Oh,
I had a phone call, but I'm sure Neil filled in the slot. No, I have a couple of questions and a couple of comments, really. It's quite right to say that the biggest issue for most of the ordinary population of Cornwall in terms of being more environmentally sensitive and more able to take green initiatives is financial. And I'm sure the same applies to some of the members. I wonder whether there's been any consideration of any sort of incentive for members to be able to get electric bikes, because I know I looked into it before, and I would love to have an electric bike, but I'm not sure that I could afford to do that at the moment. So can there be consideration of an incentive to encourage us, particularly when we're travelling more, to be able to use electric bikes? Electric bikes. Trees, as Neil said, are not the only thing that captures carbon, and we need to be looking wider. So hopefully in your consultations with and discussions with NFU and smallholders associations, you're looking at other carbon trapping systems as well, such as heathland and wetland setups, because managing the land in a way that doesn't release carbon is quite important. And actually for Cornwall, managing land in a way that doesn't release carbon is also often managing land in a way that doesn't release metals and minerals from historic mining activity. So can we get, I'm sure some of the Forest for Cornwall people are able to talk about other things other than trees. So will there be advice for people who are looking at other habitat creation as well? In terms of the Forest for Cornwall people, and it will be useful to have I think for members to have a structure and who's who and who to talk to about what. If they have different skills and different roles, then a bit more detail on that maybe at some point, a briefing or something would be really helpful, I think. For school education, school visits, Cornwall Heritage Trust manage a scheme to provide subsidised transport for young people to get to heritage sites. Have we considered whether there could be some sort of scheme to encourage outdoor education, young people from schools in the less privileged areas to be able to get out into nature and into the environment by providing a subsidised transport system? Because it does make a huge difference if a school wants to take a class out and they've got to book a bus and every child's got to pay £5. A lot of children are disenfranchised by that. So something that might be quite useful either through Cornwall Wildlife Trust or through the council to run some sort of scheme. At the moment, schools are not doing any outdoor education hardly at all because of COVID and trying to do catch up. But I think by next year they will be looking at that, so that would be good. Yeah, so that's my points.
Okay, I'll kick off, then I'll move it. I'll do quickly. So there are some crowdfunding opportunities. The council have put up some significant funds to match fund through crowdfunding. So I think there's 3 different funds. One's for town and parish councils to try and maybe do a carbon audit. There's a Forest for Cornwall for tree planting one. It's all on the Hive, all this information. There's also the Seed Corn Fund to promote environmental growth. I think that's up to £1,000. Like you say, working practices on farms are something that, I mean, I'm really out of my depth talking about this, but I did understand that if you plough a whole furrow, you unlock that carbon. If you drill individually, I'm sure that Councillor Burden knows far more about this than me, and that is being looked at. We had a food and farming conference just the week before lockdown, I think it was, and they had 2 farms that were exemplar farms that they were looking at mapping their carbon, and most of the cost of their carbon was actually the pesticides and the herbicides that they put onto the land, working with them to see about their working practices. So there's a lot of really good stuff going on there. Environmental policy frameworks for town and parish councils has been circulated. It's thrown the kitchen sink at it, it's fair to say, but you can choose to make those policies work for you, and there's lots of good ideas. Agree a who's who would be really helpful. I'm not sure if Wheels to Work is still working. I know it's a charity, but I actually love that forest school approach. I think kids can learn as much from just jumping around in mud in a field or in a woodland than they can in a workplace. And that may be one of the little upsides of home educating, that there are other creative things that parents can do, but they need a bit of help on that, I know. Rob?
Thanks. I don't know why. Well, the reason councillors can't get onto the staff scheme to get electric bikes is we get allowances instead of salaries, which to me is just a nonsense. We all get our check in the post. Well, we all get our money paid into our bank every month, same as everybody else. So I think with Edwina, we'll push that. We should be on that scheme. It's very useful. I know the council have bought a lot of electric bikes for staff, which they've been trialling out, and I had a loan one, so did Councillor Rich, and we went out and about together on the electric bikes, and we had conversations with people as we went around. Half my ward is residence parking, so it'd be a lot easier for me to get up and see people just as soon as just once they get brave enough to tackle this roundabout. But yeah, I think we will push that. Farming, the conference Edwina spoke about there, out of that we had planned to have a little mini conference with our county farms in sort of March of this year, but that all went by the by with the pandemic. But we were going to talk to our own county farm people and whoever else wanted to join in about the benefits of herbal leys I've discussed, and different farming methods that do, you know, I'm out of my depth on this as well, but it's best if farmers talk to farmers about this, and we have people. And Cornish hedges, of course. Loveday, you don't need me to tell you that Cornish hedges are outstanding for biodiversity. And as Will Coleman constantly tells us all, they're the oldest structures in the world still in use for their original purpose. And I was glad to see they've got started on work at Kedroyer again, where they're bringing all the different sorts of Cornish hedges that we have across Cornwall into one place, into a sort of maze that you can go around. It'd be great to see when we can go and see that. Education, isn't it? And then verges. We've reduced the cut on verges. You know, we've got absolutely miles and miles. I hesitated over my speaker's notes earlier on as we talked about 27 rugby pitches, and I thought, well, actually, if you add all these verges together, it's a huge amount. of biodiversity, that if we're putting wildflower seeds into them, leaving a few cuts, so we're not cutting them all in May as soon as the wildflowers poke up, we can encourage biodiversity there and do good things. But people we need to get across to people, it's just not there to look pretty. There's a reason for it, and that's where the education comes in, and tell people about it. And we mustn't assume that everyone is as knowledgeable as you and Neil. There's people like me who when I found myself sat at home in front of laptops all day, little desks sat looking out in the window, Moira bought me a book on birds, so I can start identifying the things that are moving about out there. It's been interesting. You know, I can tell a wren and a thrush now. I know what they look like, just like that. And it's been great. You know, I think some of the benefits of lockdown, isn't it? You know, we got a little closer to nature. I watched some pigeons hatch out their chicks, and I watched the chicks' first flights. I had no idea there was a pigeon's nest out there. I'd never even noticed. So yeah, great education, absolutely right. Do more things. So we're with you. We're with you, Loveday.
Okay, thank you for that. I don't see any more questions, so just to perhaps wrap this up, I did have a message from somebody who's listening in, from John Carley from Chasewater, who was really enjoying the presentation, and he's offered their electric vehicles that they got down there for use by the people at the G7 conference. So I think the point of that is that there are so many people and communities doing fantastic stuff, passionate people out there. Cornwall Council can play a role in all of this, but to deliver that carbon neutral future, it's the people of Cornwall, and we have to help them along the way to make that, to reach that goal. I don't think there's any other questions, so thank you very much for your attendance. Feel free if you've got any other suggestions or questions. I'm sure Rob and I would be very pleased to follow up after, and stay safe.
Thanks very much. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. On to our next laptop meeting.
Yep, next one, back to back today.